We have some insane new details that just dropped from multiple insiders that the New York Rangers are still very much in trade talks with the Vancouver Canucks to acquire J.T. Miller, and the return is going to have Rangers fans fired up. We're going to break it all down in this episode of Rangers Digest, but before we do that, a quick reminder to hit that subscribe button. About 74% of you who watch these videos are not subscribed to the channel. So if you're a diehard New York Rangers fan and you want to stay up to date with everything New York Rangers, because it seems like they're back, they're playing some great hockey, it's free. Be sure to hit that subscribe button. Now, we have some very interesting new details that drop from multiple insiders like Elliotte Friedman, for example, on the next J.T. Miller trade that happened just this past weekend. And we have some new details that surfaced on what the return actually was, and that the New York Rangers are still very much in trade talks to acquire J.T. Miller. And I'm going to go over in this video why I think, that might actually be the right move for the New York Rangers to a degree. We'll get into the nitty gritty of it. But again, Elliotte Friedman dropped his written blog, and there was a lot of great juicy stuff in this one. And from Phil, who transcribed it, the Hurricanes and the Rangers are two teams with permission to talk to J.T. Miller, and he believes that the New York Rangers offer was Filipino, a first rounder, and a prospect. Now, just looking at this in a vacuum, right? This is a great return, I think, for J.T. Miller. I think you do this trade 9.5 times out of 10, right? Personally, and I think that you run away and you change your phone number after if you're Chris Drury, because do you need the first rounder? Maybe you want to start developing young players, but you already have some decent young talent coming up. JT Miller is still going to be a really, really effective player for at least 4 years, I think, at this point. Filipino has dealt with some injury troubles, right? And we don't know who the prospect is, but again, I had a video the other day where I went through the list of the Rangers prospects, and I was like, take your pick, honestly, at this point, because JT Miller would really help this team. And the Rangers can afford JT Miller. They have a lot of cap space, but cap space is something that affected this trade as well, and we'll get to that in a bit. But again, if it's Filipino, a first rounder, and a prospect, I think you do this trade. I think it's a no-brainer, actually, for the New York Rangers to do this, because again, JT Miller would absolutely help you this year. He would add more center depth. You wouldn't really need Filipino. Again, he's a young player, great young player, but at the same time, injury problems have risen in his career so far, his young career. This is the full thing from Elliotte Friedman. Again, the Rangers and Hurricanes have permission to talk to J.T. Miller. I get very mixed messages on New Jersey. So this is another very interesting thing that the Rangers, this happens a lot in the Atlantic Division, where teams will trade for guys at the trade deadline just to make sure that other teams don't get them. So I think this is very interesting about New Jersey and how it plays into, obviously, the Rangers and their, plan heading into the trade deadline. The Rangers have the cap room to do it outright, but the Devils would need to perform roster surgery to pull it off. Yes, they struggled until pounding Boston on Wednesday, but that's a good team. I'm not convinced about Dallas either. I always assume I'm missing something, though. So there could be a lot going on behind the scenes still, according to Elliotte Friedman, but I thought that was very interesting about how the Devils, he's not convinced, and he's getting a lot of mixed messages, but very interesting that they could be in the mix. And according to Pierre LeBrun, I thought this was very interesting as well. The Canucks have actually lowered their asking price for JT Miller. They're willing to trade for futures. I still think JT Miller goes to the Rangers. So before, if you remember, the ask or the rumor was that it was going to be Alexis Lafreniere or Braden Schneider. And the rumor with other teams was, roster players. We want somebody immediately that can make an impact on our team. Sounds like that might have changed a little bit. Now they're looking more at possibly adding futures, and when you look at this, that kind of checks out. Filipino, I would consider him a bit of a future. He's a guy who will come into your NHL lineup right now and can have an impact, but a first rounder and a prospect, those are futures. So very interesting. This kind of does check out with everything we're hearing as of late. I think that's very interesting, and if the price has lowered to this degree, Rangers should be all over it. But there is one thing that I think was holding up this trade, and that is, and again, from multiple sources, sounds like the Rangers are all in on JT Miller as much as possible, even from Paul Bissonnette. I heard Drury would do bad things to get JT Miller. So I keep hearing that Rangers to JT Miller connection. How much do we trust Biz? We don't know, but he throws stuff out there at times, right? The one thing that I think is holding up this trade is, besides the conditions on a first rounder, which I think is something that is holding up the trade, is JT Miller's contract. He makes quite a bit. right? Like, he makes $8 million. The Rangers can fit his entire contract if they want right now. They have an absurd amount of cap space heading into the trade deadline. And not even at the trade deadline, they could add him tomorrow and it wouldn't even like really make a dent, right? Which is crazy because of all the money that they've moved out with obviously the Jacob Trouba trade and a couple other moves in the offseason as well. So J.T. Miller, again, year 2 of a 7-year contract at $8 million. I believe that they wanted the Vancouver Canucks to retain some salary. Vancouver's saying no way because we're not retaining salary for the next, 4 years on this deal. That makes no sense for us, which I can see making sense. He's 31. Why would you want to retain salary when you still want to be competitive, a competitive team? I can see that making sense. If you're the Rangers, again, this is a tough contract. I will say that. Like, this has potential to get really ugly if you take all of it on. At the same time, I think Miller's still going to be a really effective player for the next 4 years at least. So is this a risk you run with this core? Do you think this core can get over the hump? We haven't really seen it yet, right? But adding a player like this is the type of player that they need, right? This is the type of player that we've been saying they could use. This is exactly who he is. He's a playoff performer. He's physical. He's a dog on the puck. He's great on the power play. This is a guy that they could add. Again, if you look at his stats so far this season, he has obviously 32 points in 36 games, so he's almost a point-a-game player. He had over 100 points last year. So, again, he plays a lot of ice time, plays in different situations. This is a guy who would absolutely help you this season and for a few seasons after this, but it just depends. Do you want to take on that full cap hit? And, if the trade doesn't go through because of this, right, you have to consider your options, I think, at this point. Like, do we just eat the salary because we want this player? And I think Chris Drury wants this player. I honestly think that's, whether you like it or not, whether you think it's good for the team or not, I think Chris Drury just wants this player and he wants him this year. So I think it's really going to come down to, will Vancouver retain salary? I don't think they're going to. And I think at the end of the day, this trade will be done. I think that J.T. Miller is going to be a New York Ranger before the trade deadline this year. He will be a New York Ranger. So pretty exciting in by way of, the Rangers will get better immediately adding a player like this, and they're very much in the playoff mix, especially the way that they're playing. So that could be interesting. You sneak into the playoffs, you play maybe a younger, inexperienced team that's at the top of the conference right now. I'm talking about maybe New Jersey, which didn't go great last time. We know that, but New Jersey's up there. Obviously, Carolina's up there. I think the Rangers could beat Carolina again. They've always had their number. There's a couple teams where the Rangers, if they sneak into the playoffs, they could potentially make some noise. That's all I'm saying, especially with a guy like J.T. Miller, especially getting the goaltending they're getting. And Will Borgen has added some steadiness and some calmness to the blue line as well. So I think they could be a hard out in the playoffs here. It's going to get very interesting. But again, from Sierra Valley, the Rangers wanted the Canucks to retain salary on the Knicks trade. That's kind of why I fell through. I was also hearing that, the conditions on the first round pick kind of made it fall through. So they're going to circle back on this. They have been. A lot of people have been saying that they are circling back on this, and he's most likely to become a New York Ranger by the end of the season. And the Canucks, there's not too many teams that are interested, right? So they're going to have to lower their price a little bit at this point to make this deal work, because I don't see them hanging on to this player with all the turmoil in their dressing room. So very interesting. Again, from Sierra Valley, it's abundantly clear that they're trying to make something work with J.T. Miller. And I think some of the pushback that I got was on the Rangers' end was not so much that it was a clause and that it was related to a first-round pick being moved, but that it was that the Rangers not being willing to take on the entirety of J.T. Miller's contract. That ended up being the hang-up. So I think that they're going to revisit this. I think the Rangers have a ton of cap space that they can use. But that being said, you got to look at K'Andre Miller, whether you like his play or not. You have to look at K'Andre Miller, because he's due for an extension. I'm going to do a video on this as well in a couple days, or maybe tomorrow, depending on what happens in the game tonight. But, you have a couple options here that you have to look at. Like, K'Andre Miller needs an extension. What does that look like? He wants a significant raise. I don't know if he's earned it. Lafreniere's new contract kicks in. So you have cap space this season, but if you add all $8 million for the next couple of years, it could handicap you with some of your younger players. So Chris Drury has a lot of thinking to do if he wants to get this trade done and how badly he wants this player. But let me know in the comments what you think. I think it's actually very exciting with the way that the Rangers have been playing so far this season, or this year, I should say, 2025, that they could potentially make the playoffs. And if they have a guy like J.T. Miller, they could rattle the cages a little bit, make some noise. I think it's very interesting. So let me know what you think about that in the comments. Let me know what you think about the new merchandise on the wall. Got the Will Cooley jersey up now. We had to add something new to the wall. But let me know what you think in the comments. And if you haven't yet, hit that subscribe button so you can stay up to date with everything New York Rangers.